Hello Victorians, and welcome to Update 1.9. In this video, we'll be discussing the world market, diplomatic treaties, military quality of life, and companies. So let's get started. What is the world market? The world market is where autonomous trades take place. Every good traded in the world has a world market price based on supply and demand. Now, if you're wondering where the world market exists, it exists, conceptually, in the ocean. Once you have access to the sea, you have the ability to trade on the world market, which is broken up into national markets and subdivided into market areas. Now, a market area consists of a number of states that are all connected by land or by straits. For example, the Spanish market has several market areas in it. One for Spain itself, one for Cuba, one for Puerto Rico, and another one for the Philippines. Prussia, on the other hand, only has a single market area, which contains not only Prussia itself, but all the states and the countries in the Zollverein. If you would like to trade with the world market, a market area must have at least one port, and then a world market hub will be established. When there are multiple ports in a market area, the hub is factored based on variables such as port level and state GDP. Hubs are not completely static, but do not generally move around unless a much more suitable candidate state emerges to eclipse the old hub state. We also now have trade centers. The trade centers are the buildings that allow states to trade on the world market, both importing and exporting. Trade is state dependent, and the buildings can be built manually or by private investors in each state. Trade centers provide trade capacity, which allows states to trade with the world market. Each trade capacity allows for a certain quantity of a good to be imported or exported, and the amount varies by good. Imported goods are purchased from the world market and sold in the state, so they are profitable when the goods are cheaper in the world market than they are in the state, with the opposite being true for exports. Trade uses local prices, so it is more profitable to import goods to a state where there is high demand. For example, luxury clothes into a state with a large number of wealthy pops. Weekly trades are a value created by the trade center. They will increase or decrease trade volumes to create profit for themselves. Trade centers will also have a preference weight with all other trade centers based on a number of factors, such as interests, relations, diplomatic agreements, and geographic distance, and will have a tendency to trade more with a higher weight trade center than with a lower weight trade center. And they are not reliant on convoys or any government-produced resources. Instead, they purchase merchant marines, a new type of good created by ports, which are no longer government-only buildings and no longer have a limit to how many you can build. The convoys are now used for military supply, army transport, and goods transfer, a treaty article which we'll talk about more soon. The trades are autonomous, but can be influenced by tariffs and subventions. Tariffs will collect a fee from your trade centers for each good of the relevant type imported or exported, and so effectively serve to reduce trade volume of that good by making it less profitable to trade. Subventions, on the other hand, function in the opposite manner, paying the trade center a certain amount of money for each trade in a specific direction, and can be used in a variety of ways, such as subsidizing a critical import of military goods or to muscle out the competition for one of your principal exports. Now let's talk about trade advantage. Trade advantage is calculated for each trade center, for each good, in each direction. For example, a trade center in Lancashire will have a different amount of trade advantage when exporting luxury clothes, which is different from coffee, which is different from dyes. Trade advantage is multiplied by the amount of traded units and then compared to the trade advantage of all other trade centers trading the same good in the same direction. The higher a trade center's share of global trade advantage compared to its share of global trade volume, the higher its relative advantage, which in turn translates to a better price. Advantage is a zero-sum game. The average price on imports and exports is always equal to the world market price. So any improvement on prices a trade center gains always comes at the expense of its competitors. The key takeaway here is that a high advantage is a better price. But how do you trade as a landlocked nation? You will need transit rights with a foreign nation in order to be able to trade through their world market hub. For example, Switzerland could negotiate transit rights with Austria to be able to use their market hubs to trade to the world market. or with Sardinia Piedmont to trade into a Mediterranean port. Diplomatic treaties. So what are diplomatic treaties? Diplomatic treaties are a new way for you to interact with other countries diplomatically with more negotiation involved. You can now negotiate with other countries to find a deal that satisfies both parties or to force through unequal treaties. Maintenance cost for each article is added in influence and depends on the article, and like many other things in the game, can be customized. Each article in the treaty can be mutual or can be directional, i.e. it only applies one way. This will replicate the functionality of the old system, but giving the player more options such as military assistance, state transfer, money transfer, military access, transit rights, treaty ports, and transfer goods. A treaty port is now a coastal split state held under a treaty, and is part of the market of the country that cedes the port, allowing trade with the world market. Tariffs and subventions do not affect a treaty port, and if the treaty is broken, then the treaty port becomes a regular split state. A treaty is ended when either side withdraws from the treaty. You can choose to end a treaty during the binding period, but there will be penalties. If you withdraw from a treaty prior to its binding period ending, either voluntarily or because it breaks as a result of you not fulfilling your part of the deal, you will receive a penalty which scales based on the nature of the treaty. Different articles within the treaty may come with different penalties. The binding period is the period of time in which you cannot withdraw freely from the treaty. After this time expires, either side can freely withdraw without consequences. Renegotiations can take place, however, to alter existing treaties. If the other party agrees, then the old treaty is replaced with the new one. Non-fulfillment is a serious breach of the treaty, such as not answering a call to arms. This will break the treaty, and the party at fault will receive all penalties tied to an early withdrawal. For less serious breaches, what happens is the other side of the treaty will be inactive until the breach is addressed, at which point the treaty resumes as usual. There are also enforced treaties, which are treaty articles enforced through a war goal. On to the military. We have attempted to address front splitting. Fewer fronts should now be generated, resulting in less fronts that can then split. Army marching from one side of a front to another has been heavily reduced due to changes in the front camp logic. Formation teleportation has been addressed as well. Once an army finds itself in a situation where they do not have access to an HQ, now they'll enter an exiled status and have to walk or ship themselves home. An exiled army has a few special rules. They can march through neutral and enemy territory. They are not able to attach themselves to a front. They need to regroup at a friendly HQ first. They will automatically target the nearest valid HQ and go there. They will suffer from attrition as if they were present at the front, and attrition will be higher in enemy territory than in neutral. Their organization value will drift towards 0 over time, and once the exiled army reaches the targeted HQ, they will lose their exiled status and act like a regular formation again. Some changes have been made to organization and morale. Organization is now a drifting value. So when a commander dies, it will set a new target and slowly drift towards the new value. This will give you time to hire or promote a new general in their place. The low organizational penalty is now slightly different. When you have full organization, you suffer no consequences. If you go down to 0, you will suffer 100% of the penalties. Previously, it was reaching 100% of the penalties at 25 organization instead of 0. The base command limit has now been set to 10. That means that small formations of maximum of 10 units do not require a commander to have full organization anymore, and supply will impact organization. So if the organization target of a formation is currently 100, but the formation supply is only 50, the organization target will be set to 50 instead. Military access. Military access is a one-sided diplomatic pact that two countries have established. For example, Belgium could grant military access to Prussia without being granted the same. This allows establishment of fronts through a neutral country via land invasions, which are very similar to naval invasions in functionality. Additionally, we now have a more compact mobilization window layout for formations by default. We have updated the formations tooltip. It now shows which unit is in said formation. The offense and defense stats of units are now shown in more places. In the military tab, you will find a summary of your military expenses. Another change we've made is to stack all allied and enemy formation markers on the same front to make for a cleaner UI. Your own formations, though, are not affected by this. Hovering over the stack will still allow you to see all the individual formations inside. Admirals have a new order, to blockade, which cuts off trade and convoys in adjacent hostile ports. Strategic objectives have been changed so that all generals now care about them and prioritize that target, and the strategic objectives can be set per formation. Companies now have executives. The executive is the head of the company, and a new character role with traits. The company executives will also boost political power for their affiliated interest groups. We have refined the company interface with new company-specific panels. There is now a global display of all companies and a leaderboard of those companies, a company asset tab, and a statistics tab. The company countries like the East India Company, Hudson Bay Company, and Russian Alaska are now related to and originate from the company headquarters in the appropriate country, like Great Britain or Russia. Prosperity is now a target value that you drift towards instead of a constant upward or downward movement. The target value is influenced by the current productivity of the company and also the number of staffed building levels the company owns. The popularity of the executive leading the company can impact the target value too. With a high popularity, it increases, and with a low popularity, it decreases. The speed at which prosperity drifts towards its target value is affected mostly by the size of the company and a base value. Forming a company can be done with privately owned buildings that you pay for, and we are making the establishment of new companies slightly easier by reducing the number of required building levels. They will now be able to buy building levels owned by financial districts and manor houses. And finally, we have removed the trade lens from the game.